Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Gregory. I am the executive director of a human rights and journalism network called Witness. And today we're going to do a very rapid-fire tour of what is happening with Deceptive AI video. Just to contextualize why a human rights group is working on this, we've been working on deepfake, synthetic media, and generative AI now for about 8 years. And it comes out of a place that I think many folks in the journalism and human rights space share, which is a concern about how this impacts our ability to trust and use frontline realities documented in accountability in journalism. And our work is very broad-based, and I'm going to draw on it talking today because it includes work that is very directly supporting journalists and community media. For example, training on how to do AI detection, running a rapid response mechanism, but we also do work on the policy and technical decisions that are being made around this. We try and bridge between the sort of hands-on work and drive our policy work based on what journalists and human rights defenders tell us they want. So that's a little bit of the context here for it. What I'll try and cover today are these 4 things and leave some time for questions, which is what are the key developments in generative AI video? What is happening? What are the usages of deceptive AI video? What are some technical solutions in Guardrails and how they're being deployed, and where is regulation? And you'll see a couple of other references here on the page. One is the broader information we have. The other is a piece of guidance we released yesterday. This was developed as part of our work last year and continuing around AI detection. This was supported by Microsoft as part of a grant from them, and it explains how to use AI detection tools, how to make good choices on that. So first, maybe the key development side. And, I always think, the best way to look at AI video is to start with Will Smith eating spaghetti. It is the classic test of whether AI video works, and probably people remember the nightmarish Will Smith eating spaghetti on the left-hand side, which involved spaghetti kind of going through the sides of his mouth, morphing into his head. In 2024, Will Smith eating spaghetti looked like he was really, really hungry, but it didn't go through his head. And 2025, he's doing quite well. He's enjoying a nice plate of spaghetti, probably not as good as we've been eating here in Perugia, but he's eating spaghetti in a way that looks realistic. And I think this is the sort of the direction of travel we're talking about is greater realism, greater physics, though not always perfect, and increasingly continuity, and including in the last couple of weeks some demonstration of continuity between scenes, which is a really important point because a lot of this is sort of single take video. Another example that's been on my mind, and of course I work for a human rights organization, so I'm often thinking very much in the context of how this video is used in public settings. Folks may be familiar with Pikachu in Turkey. Pikachu in Turkey is, on the left-hand side, an individual in a Pikachu costume running during the recent protests in Turkey following the suppression of the Democratic opposition candidate there in the upcoming elections. This is a real video. There was also this photo that came out and that was circulated quite widely. That's an AI-generated image. Then there was this photo, which I hope everyone can recognize as an AI-generated image because it has Batman and the Joker alongside Pikachu. And then it gets a little more complicated when we come to the AI video, because this video started coming out, and this is an AI video made from an AI image that is realistic, okay? So I want to point to the complexity here, and I also want to flag to people that although I'm talking about AI video is part of what we talk about as multimodality, right? Inputs that are text or image or video that may come out as image or video, right? So the flexibility to go in and out of those. Let me show you another example, and I want you to take a moment and think, which of these protests is real? Top left hand, anyone want to go with that one? Top right? No, okay, bottom left? Okay, bottom right? Okay. Now, of course, I am being utterly unfair because none of them are real. Yeah, sorry, that's the trick you can play if you're up here. But I want to use them to explain what is happening in generative AI video and also give you a sense of some of the platforms that are available to do that and what they do well and badly. So I'm going to focus on the major players. So I'm going to talk about first Dream Machine by Luma Labs. You see it there. And I'm not going to go into the technical details. Many of these you can explore yourself. But what you'll see is that, generally they're quite short length, though extendable, and they have that multimodality, right? Like image to video, text to video, extension of videos. So another one would be Kling by Kwai. That's a Chinese company. And again, the prompt here is one my colleague developed, which is, protest in New York City, right? So they're all the same prompt, essentially. You'll see in this one that the text on the banners doesn't look quite right. As we know with the recent ChatGPT-4 release with on image, that's been fixed, and right, so that sort of idea that we can't understand text in AI, imagery and video is going away fast. This is Runway Gen 4. I was very impressed by this. It came out a few days ago. This is taking an original image and turning it into a video with quite a high degree of realism. And then the one that I think people thought was most likely realistic, there is a whole genre of people creating body cam footage with Sora, which is the OpenAI tool. And it's pretty realistic, right? Now, of course, if you looked at it closely, you'd see those signs don't quite make sense. But again, same types of thing. Physics kind of work. The scene makes sense logically. The movement, of course, because there's a lot of body cam footage out there. You can train models on body cam footage because there's a ton of it out there. And VO2, we don't have access to this one from Google, so I'm just showing one of their examples. Always take an example released by a company with a grain of salt because they're selective about what they release. But again, you can see some of the same characteristics. This is one from Alibaba. Again, we don't have access, but same kind of characteristics in a promotional video. And then this is something that is not available commercially, but I want to point to it's OmniHuman by ByteDance. And what it's doing is taking a single data point and doing a mix of video, potentially audio, right? So your multimodality going in multiple directions, right? So image to audio and video. Again, haven't tested it, so I don't want to make any promises what it actually does, but that sort of direction of travel makes a lot of sense. And all of this is coming together, and we've been working in this space of witness for 7 or 8 years. Obviously, the research has been taking place for a decade and more on many of these areas, and it's all coming together in certain ways. So what you've got up there is something like PoseNet, which was like body mimicking, right? So you could take someone's body movements and transfer them to an avatar or another individual in video, animating 2D to 3D content with NeRF approaches in 2022, facial animation, and many people may be familiar with the idea of virtual avatars, companies like Synthesia. And on the right is someone who's really one of the global leading experts in this field, Hani Farid, who's actually doing a TED Talk today about this, which I imagine will be a really great TED Talk, showing that we used to think that if you had a deep fake and something went in front of the face, that it wasn't that you lost the quality of the faker. In this video, you see him proving that you can occlude the face and still have the deep fake. So broadly speaking, key advancements to think about here, obviously easier access. Most of these I'm testing, right? So they're not hidden away. Realism, duration, resolution, more complex motion and physics, increasing multimodality, combined with audio, lip syncing body movement, as I showed you in the last slide, and less input data. And of course, if you interact with an AI assistant, increasingly you can do that multimodally as well. The places where this struggles a bit, and these are all short clips, are longer clips, continuity of scenes, right? So if you're trying to put together multiple clips in a consistent way that preserves character, preserves context, that is sort of the next challenge, but we're starting to see things improving in that space. And ahead, and I think this is, from a human rights perspective, raises lots of questions, increasingly sophisticated AI-generated avatars and videos, and personalization, so tweaking as you're engaging with AI, and hyper-personalized content. This, I think, is something that, as journalists and people in our space, we need to think about. You see the experiments by Meta in generating hyper-personalized content just for you in your timeline. At the moment, that's image-based. There's no reason that shouldn't be video-based, and that has all kinds of implications about how we think about the shared public sphere and what information we're receiving if you're just getting information made for you in multimodal formats like video. So let's have a think about how this is being used. What is the deceptive AI video landscape? Let me share a few places. And I'm going to do it within a spectrum of usage. I think it's important to recognize that AI video is being used in a whole range of ways. And I'm going to start with uses that are probably pro-social and positive, right? And many of these folks will know, so I'm going to go through them quite quickly. India, and I was on a panel yesterday with Nilesh Christopher. We ran a panel on detecting AI deception. Nilesh has done much of the reporting in this area, but using videos in personalized ways to do campaign outreach, to reach out to people in their own language, to have AI avatar spokespeople. In principle, these are all about access and inclusion and have been deployed in the last year. AI video to engage and enrage, right? Like the two examples here that are, I think at least the left one is well known. The Trump-Gaza video, a piece of video made as satire, shared by President Trump in a way that engaged his supporters, enraged many other people. And then during the AI Action Summit, President Macron released a video in which he used the AI deepfakes of himself to promote the summit, which is very meta in a kind of philosophical way, I guess. Jokey and satirizing. A lot of our work at Witness is on the fine lines around parody and gaslighting and disinformation. I think I have one video in here. Okay, there we go. And then there's also a Russian AI parody video of the Trump-Gaza video that parodies Trump's apparent willingness to compromise with President Putin. And I think it's really important that we think about this, and there's been great reporting by 404 Media around AI slop, which is just the idea of just a lot of AI video that receives much more attention than regular video. So let me move on to a little bit what we're seeing on the deceptive side. I want to start by saying that like the largest problem, and this is deceptive video, but it's also malicious and harmful video, is non-consensual intimate and sexual images created with synthetic media. On the left, you have a piece of research by the American Sunlight Project, led by Nina Yankovitz, that identified that 1 in 6 congresswomen had sexually synthetic sexual images of them online. And we've seen that globally in our work, unfortunately targeting both public figures, but also women and girls. So deceptive and malicious. Often the deception is not the point there. It's obvious, it's synthesized, but the harm is what is coming out of that. Scam videos, again, very broad global phenomenon that probably each of us have experienced, right? Or someone we know. I'm going to start to move towards some of the videos that we are most directly engaged with in our witness work in a moment. Certainly we're seeing a range of ways that people are using both AI manipulated videos. That's the one on the left where Ukrainian influencer found themselves incorporated into pro-Chinese Russia alliance propaganda against her will, but also literally synthetic avatars. So on the right you have avatars. Those are virtual humans. They are not real people, or not in the real people in the sense of someone whose face has been manipulated. They are actors who have given their image to a company, and it is then being repurposed into various roles. Let me talk about what we see most directly in the witness context, because I think these are often the most extreme deceptive examples, and I want to ground it in something we run called the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force. It's the only global mechanism that helps people, frontline journalists and fact checkers, get access to media forensics expertise around high critical risk cases, like places where people are claiming something's a deepfake, say in an election environment. And in that context, we've seen deepfakes in the Ukraine context, the deepfake on the right of the Senegalese president appearing to speak languages he didn't speak, saying things that were compromising, and ones that are, like trying to compromise the credibility of public figures. So Keir Starmer on the left, apparently claiming that he knew when he was Attorney General of the UK or Solicitor General about or stopped an investigation into a well-known paedophile in the UK, and then an advisor to President Zelensky stating he supports Putin. Now, I want to point to one thing that often doesn't get talked about in the discussion of deceptive AI video. A lot of what we see in our Deepfakes Rapid Response Force are people using the existence of AI video to dismiss real content. So on this, I'll show you 2 examples. On the left, a vice presidential candidate in Ghana denying a video that was filmed at a public rally. So it's a video where other people are filming, and when it came out, he said some compromising things in it. He promptly said it can be made with AI. And what he's doing there is he's trading on the public's lack of understanding of what is possible, which is pervasive. On the right, This was a video that came out of the RSF militia leader in Sudan. He hadn't been seen in public for a while, and people said this must have been deepfaked. Again, it's a good example of something that's really hard to deepfake. It's him in public with lots of people. So the reason I show these is also to point, like, a lot of the time, the lack of understanding about what you can do with AI video is pervasive, and political leaders trade on that. So again, going back to that example around Pikachu, a lot of what we see at the moment is a lack of understanding around what is possible and this blurring between real and faked that you see in that Pikachu example. So just some lessons learned about deceptive AI video over the last year, particularly in this sort of hyped up election year, 2024. I think a lot of people overhyped the presence of AI in the elections that took place in 2024. We at Witness were very anti-hype. We think that panic gets misused. For example, in those cases where the political leaders then use the panic to deny reality. But what we saw running this deepfakes rapid response force was in fact that in many places, frontline journalists were having a really hard time actually distinguishing AI-generated content or claims that something was AI and explaining it to their public. With AI detection, you often get to 80 or 90% effectiveness at the best case, and they were doing this with a relatively small volume of videos. So what I want to point to is, although we are not in a kind of AI apocalypse with deceptive AI video, there are very visible fault lines around our ability to detect it and manage it. And again, those are being misused in what's known as the liar's dividend, the idea that liars can claim that something is AI to dismiss the truth, and they can plausibly deny things because people don't know what is possible, and we're not able to detect it effectively. So let me talk about technical solutions and guardrails. And I'll start with detection, because I've been talking about that, and just explain a little more about what works and what doesn't with detection. So this is the idea. You've got a video, you see it on your timeline, or a journalist and you see it. How do you determine if it's AI from a technical point of view? And again, I'm going to draw on this experience with the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force and the training we've been doing with frontline journalists, fact-checkers, and civil society. And I think the key things to know, first, that video isn't actually the most primary thing that folks are seeing. It's primarily audio. Audio is definitely the place where deception is happening at the moment, and people have rapidly been building tools for AI detection on audio. And most of the cases where people are denying reality are actually audio, because they know that it's quite hard to deny that audio that apparently shows you in a corrupt act or calling on your political opponent to be assassinated. And in summary, detection is kind of flawed. It's frequently inconclusive. And the one thing I want to emphasize, it works far less well in global contexts. So it works much better for media formats, for media, for languages that are from Europe and the US. Works far less well in Khmer, Arabic, in accented English. If you're interested in this topic, we did a whole session yesterday, which you can watch on record, on detecting AI deception with some of the leading experts in this space. So I'm not going to talk so much about it today. I'm just going to point to some examples that we experienced that showed how hard it was. Example of the Philippine president allegedly snorting cocaine. They weren't able to analyze it because the clip quality was too low. An example of the former president of Prime Minister of Ghana endorsing an opposition party. Couldn't reach a definitive conclusion because the AI tools didn't work so well on skin tone and because of the compression of the video. These are very normal things, right? Compression is part of our ecosystem, and a range of skin tones is part of our global information ecosystem. And I want to point to one final example here is, and I want to put this warning out here, and you'll find it in the guide here, public detectors are terrible. They give false positives, false negatives, and the information spreads fast. I don't know what to do about it. This is an example from Mexico. It's an image-based example, not video, where a rumor spread that the former president knew El Chapo, the drug lord. And a lot of the reason the rumor spread was because the detectors didn't show that it was a deep fake or a manipulated image. And so we talk about a lot of the problem around this is the detection equity gap. The tools to detect are not available to the people who need them most, primarily journalists and civil society globally. And again, lots more information in this guide if you're interested. Another way you can do this is what's called a watermark or a classifier. Watermarks are the things that are sort of deeply embedded when you create it. A good example is something like Synth ID from Google, which is in the VO generator that I don't have access to, so I don't know if it works. And then there are classifiers that work for a specific product. The well-known one is the tool that identifies 11 labs voice generation. 11 Labs is a very popular voice generator. The problem with these is they only identify content from that tool, and that means you get false positives and false negatives if you test it on something made by another tool. And frankly, there are lots of tools out there. The other thing that people are invested in this space is our tools for disclosure and transparency. The way I like to talk about this is they show you the recipe of how AI and human are combined in what you're looking at, or listening to, or watching, right? And so you can find out, was this made with an AI model? Was it captured with a camera? Was it edited with AI? Because again, AI is not binary, right? It's part of our media production and distribution and consumption. So a good example of this is something called C2PA. I've put a few examples up on the screen. A lot of companies involved in this. Witness runs the threats and harms group in that technical standards area. And the way it shows up, you can see it on the left, that's something called content credentials. It's a little icon that you click in this case in a LinkedIn post, that shows you information about how the video was made, the recipe of it, so to speak, or the image. And then the one in the middle is what YouTube does if you capture it with a camera that uses this technology. It can put captured with a camera. So it's sort of the opposite of AI. It's like, actually, this was made with a camera, not with AI. Again, because that might be something you really want to know, right? Was something captured with a camera, not synthesized with AI. Few things to know about this. It is not widespread yet, though many companies are adopting it. It probably never will be universal, so we shouldn't build a world where we expect that everything will have these signals. And as we build it, and this is a lot of our work at Witness, and I'm happy to talk to folks more about this, and we share a lot of information on this, there's a lot of questions about how to build it right in a way that, for example, protects privacy. Make sure we don't associate a technical signal like that little CR with trust. It's not trust, it's just telling you the recipe. That recipe might be really crappy and taste terrible. It's just telling you the recipe of AI and human in that piece of information. And platforms are sort of, there's a lot of skepticism around platforms and how they're responding to AI generation. The one place where they're trying to do this is incorporating labeling into the platforms. Increasingly, you see options to label that are being placed by the platform. Some of them are automatically generated because you use a tool. Others are added by the user. Others come from this data that's in the video or image you created. But I think it's really worth remembering that all of this is happening alongside very significant cutbacks in all the other policies that protect us from manipulated, hateful, and deceptive information, right? So yes, this is important from an AI lens, but if you look more broadly, there's lots of things that are potentially very damaging about our trust in the information ecosystem that are going on. Regulation. I'm going to give 2 or 3 minutes on regulation just to finish us off. There's a lot going on in the world. I'll try and keep it very summarized. Broadly, you can think of it as falling into these categories. People are legislating on elections and non-consensual sexual deepfakes. They're doing broad AI transparency mandates, and that's typically on the input, right? You should know what's happening, what model it came from, perhaps the data involved, sometimes on the output. So sometimes try to mandate that we need to know the recipe, and that's typically around disclosure and labeling. There are shifts under the Trump administration that people still haven't quite got their heads around, but a lot of it is a reverse on what the Biden administration did. I think I'll just jump to my final slide to allow a few minutes for questions, but just as I'll go through these quickly so folks have a sense of sort of these different spaces. Labeling, places to look, it's global, right? So it's the EU, it's Brazil, it's US states. The EUAI Act, the one place you should look if you're interested in understanding deepfakes and synthetic media is something called Article 50. Article 50 is the key article in it, and it really emphasizes these 4 things. It emphasizes the need to inform people when they're interacting with AI, unless it's obvious, to mark AI content as artificial unless it's clear that it's not, to disclose AI-generated content, except in cases where it's about law enforcement or artistic. So for example, law enforcement, if they're trying to reach a criminal, doesn't have to disclose they're using it, and if you're creating it for artistic and satirical purposes, you don't have to label under the EUAI Act. And they demand that it be clear, accessible, and timely, right? So a crappy little label that you don't see at the right moment is not helpful. So I think this is a good start, right? And as you're starting to think about this landscape we're in, those kind of requirements to inform people, to label, to make it clear are pretty important. And some countries are really moving forward on this. The 2 I would point to at the moment are Spain, actually has started to pass legislation that is specific to this. that imposes these transparency obligations, that imposes a fine if you don't do it, and also targets subliminal techniques. And this is how the EU works, as folks know probably. You have an AI Act, and then you have implementing legislation at a national level. So countries across the EU will decide how to make it easier for us as consumers, creators, users, makers of AI systems to do this disclosure. The other place where this is happening, China, which has both an explicit labeling program, right, and you see it on the left, there's actually very close guidance, that's a translated version on how to label different types of content, and it also has a requirement to include that recipe, the sort of detailed underlying metadata. So Spain and China, 2 examples of where this is playing out now. Finally, let me finish up some potential implications if you're trying to think ahead. All of the advances technically I described at the beginning probably mean from a deceptive side, we're going to get more sophisticated and automated ways to deceive and to do that gender-based violence that is the pervasive problem now. We at Witness are very worried about the impact of this volume on fact-based reporting, right? So if you have 1 million items of AI slop, how do you make sure that the single item of ethically gathered factual documentation still is visible and accessible? On the flip side of that, we're not talking about it so much today because the title is Deceptive AI Video, but we've all used AI and we've watched AI videos that are dubbed into other languages, that enable versioning, that makes it more accessible to people. I use the phrase here, Brave New World, for one, because again, it's one of the concerns we have at Witness, and it goes back to that meta timeline example I showed you, which is that if all the content is just made for one person, we're entering the same kind of thing that's described in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which is this idea we're immersed in this very happy universe that isn't reality-based, except it's just for us. We're just going to see a lot of AI stuff made for us according to our interests and probably to entertain us. And that a lot of those mitigation measures I'm talking about are lagging behind the whole set of things I described at the start about the way this is being deployed. If you're interested in more information on this, our website is there. And that QR code is linked directly to, again, this guidance. There's lots of other guidance we have, but this one is something that we're really trying to encourage journalists and others to use in this moment. Thank you.